Okay, let's start with the easiest animation to think of, and that's fade in. What we're going to do, we're going to create the keyframes in this lecture. And when you think of it, we have two states for a fade in. You have invisible and visible, or opacity of 0 and opacity of 1. And let's write that as a keyframe. First, I'm going to make a little comment here, say animation, elements, yeah. And this is how you actually put a comment in CSS with the / asterisk and then close with asterisk /. So what we want to do, we want to create a keyframe that says go from opacity 0 to opacity 1. So we do that by going keyframes. Okay, that's the instruction, and we're going to give it a name, so we're going to call it fade in. Yeah, and then what we're going to do, we're going to say that this goes from opacity of 0, okay, and then it's going to go, let me put the semicolon on the end there which I missed off, and then it's going to go to opacity of 1. Let's close all that down, and there you have it. So this is literally saying this keyframe goes from opacity 0, invisible, to opacity 1. Now what we need to do, like with the other transform element we did before, etc., we need to actually have 3 of these. We need to have one for the standard CSS 3, one for WebKit, and one for Moz. Now this is to make sure that we have all the different web browsers supported, because obviously some will support just the standard CSS3 keyframes, and then some will be WebKit keyframes and some will be mod keyframes. But having all 3 in there means that you're actually supporting all 3 of those different things within different web browsers. So now that's just created our keyframe fade in, which we're going to be using it in our fade in CSS setup in a moment. So we'll do that in the next lecture. Okay, so we have our keyframes for the fade in effect. What we want to do now is we want to actually use that. We want to create a class that we can use within all the objects we want to have fade in. So what we're going to do, I'm going to write the CSS first, and then we're going to add that class to the elements. So because it's a class, dot, I'm going to call it fade in, and then within this I'm going to actually put all my fade in CSS code. So first of all, I want to start with opacity of 0. It's got to be 0 because we want it to be invisible, 0 opacity. If we ever do 1, then it's not going to work. So we want to start at 0, and then we want to go from 0 to 1. So the next thing we want to do, we want to actually use this keyframe. So what we do, we use the animation, and then what we do, we pass in the keyframe, so fade in. We want it to be an ease in effect, and then 1. What we need to do, we need to do that again for the 3 different ways, using WebKits and Moz as well as the standard CSS way. So let me just copy that, and we'll just paste it, and we'll just add the elements we need on the beginning. So for this one we want to say WebKit animation, and then for the next one we want to say Moz animation. So that sets up the use of the keyframe. The next thing we want to do, we want to use the fill mode, and we're just going to use that as forward. So we go animation. You can see the fill mode in the list there, fill mode, and we just say that's forwards. Okay. Again, copy and paste that and do the 3 ways of doing it. So first one is web kit. If you know that you're only ever going to run it in a browser that just use the standard CSS 3-way, we'd only ever have the one. The problem is you can't guarantee what they're going to run, so we want to actually put all 3 in there so that we know we're covered for the majority, if not all, the browsers. Okay, so that's the fill mode. And then the final thing we're going to do, we're going to actually set the duration. So you got animation duration, if we can go down to there, up 1, there we go. And what we're going to set this at the moment is just 1 second. Again, let's just copy that and then again fill in the elements we need, web kit, and then Mars. Right, so that's our CSS done for the fade and effect. All we need to do now is add this class to the elements we want to fade in. So let's start with our logo. Okay, we have an ID, but we can still attach a class to this. Remember, ID is that we're only ever going to use it once. Classes, we use it numerous times. So we go fade in on the logo. Okay, now let me go to my page. If I do a refresh, there we go, we saw the logo fade in. See, really simple. Now I can go and I can add this to individual elements of my web page. For example, I want to add it to the nav menu, so I would have a class there. I can still just put the fade in there. Remember, we can have lots of different elements in there. And if I want to add it to the entire body, I can actually just add it here. Put the right name. Of course, the one problem with this is it affects the entire body. If we wanted to actually have different timings, because what we could do, we could have another class and we could have different timings. So we could have this, say, use a slow class as an example, and that slow class might actually have like a separate set of timings in there, like 2 seconds fade in, for example. By having this here, we're actually controlling the entire page as a fade in, which is a quick way of doing it because it fades everything in nicely, but you might want to have things fade in separately. Anyway, as you can see, that's our fade in effect, and you can attach that class to anything. Very simple. As I said, all we have to do is the keyframes and then use those keyframes in an animation, and then just attach that class to anything you want to within any page that loads that CSS file. We could in fact have it just attach the text. We could use a span and have it in that text. So that's how you do fade in animation using HTML and CSS.